A debate over confronting Trump administration officials in public is consuming Washington at the start of this week. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was asked to leave a Virginia restaurant Friday night. The owner let her employees vote on whether she should ask Sanders to leave. Ed O'Keefe reports on Sanders' response.
The calls for harassment and push for any Trump supporter to avoid the public is unacceptable.
Sarah Sanders denounced threats made against her and other Trump officials today as members of both parties criticized a Virginia restaurant's decision to kick her out.
I was shocked that somebody would refuse service to anyone, in America.
The president's tactics and behavior should never be emulated.
Sanders was at the Red Hen restaurant in Lexington, Virginia on Friday night when the owner approached and asked the White House press secretary to leave. The owner, Stephanie Wilkinson, avoided reporters Monday, and her restaurant was closed as scheduled. But she told the Washington Post she believes Sanders works for a, quote, inhumane and unethical administration. Sanders isn't the only Trump aide or ally to face critics in recent days. Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi was heckled at a movie theater in Tampa on Friday.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen had to leave a Mexican restaurant in D.C. last week as hecklers protested the administration's immigration policy. Critics also rallied outside her Virginia home.
No justice, no sleep!
Anger and confrontation are nothing new in American politics. They seemed to peak during the 2016 campaign when Mr. Trump taunted opponents and encouraged violence during rallies.
Like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Back then, prominent Democrats urged restraint.
No, our motto is, when they go low, we go high.
But over the weekend, California Congresswoman Maxine Waters urged fellow Democrats to keep it up.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them.
Other Democrats disagree.
I did not find that helpful, and I think a lot of people want to maintain that focus on pocketbook issues.
Many Democrats believe the party needs to keep focused on concerns with the GOP's tax reform package and health care proposals and leave the controversial comments to President Trump. The president drew attention to all of this on Twitter today by singling out Congresswoman Waters, saying that she'd called for people to harm the president's supporters. Trump tweeted in part, "Be careful what you wish for." Elaine?
Well, Ed, we saw former First Lady Michelle Obama's famous quote from the 2016 election, when they go low, we go high. The Democrats, of course, lost in 2016. Do some Democrats think that it's time for the left to get more aggressive in chasing what they want?
I thought it was quite telling today, Elaine, that Senate Minority Leader Schumer, several other Democrats asked about this, sort of went out of their way to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who are upset with the president and may feel compelled to do or say things, but then pivoted to say, we Democrats, those running for office this November, should keep focused on the issues. To me, that was a signal that they understand the anger, the criticism of the president is intense and isn't going anywhere, and that increasingly many rank-and-file party members feel that, yeah, they have to fight fire with fire.
Well, does this kind of story harden support among Trump voters?
It seems to. If you look at what a lot of his supporters, more prominent supporters, said on Monday, they suggest, look, every time the left or critics of the president do this, it emboldens him, it emboldens his supporters. Senator Rubio of Florida today, the Republican, who, of course, faced President Trump's ire during the 2016 campaign, essentially suggested that over Twitter, saying, look, the more the left does this, the more the critics of the president do this, it emboldens him. And they being the opposition to the president, need to figure out and realize that the more they do that, the more it just sort of helps him out. It's that sort of push and pull that I think a lot of critics of the president feel. We saw it in conversations with voters last week. We see it from Democratic lawmakers here in Washington all the time, that they kind of want to get down there with him, but then they realize, no, that part of the contrast between the two parties, between Democrats and the president, is tone.
So you noted that several Democratic leaders, from Nancy Pelosi to Chuck Schumer, are voicing their disagreement with Congresswoman Waters' call for Trump administration officials to be confronted in public. I wonder, does the pushback from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer risk alienating the most passionate members of the Democratic base?
I think it does, and that's why you've seen so many of them today. Schumer in his floor speech and others in their comments sort of hedge it and say, I get it. I understand why there are people who are so critical of the president and maybe lashing out in the ways they are. But at the same time, we should try to be better than that. And so, you know, I think there is a chance here, especially with members who come from deep in the heart of some of the nation's biggest cities, where criticism for the president is most intense. Maxine Waters represents a part of central Los Angeles. You see it in comments from other California lawmakers. You've seen it from several who represent New York, those who represent areas of Dallas and Houston, Chicago certainly, who represent communities that have felt displaced and sort of overlooked by this administration. And that's why Waters can do this and essentially not face any repercussions back home, even if she's going to face repudiation from party leaders here in Washington and across the country.
Well, and is this a totally new development? I can't remember when the last time was that the U.S. saw continued confrontations of administration officials like this in public.
Yeah, I couldn't really think of one either. I mean, obviously, you can go back to 2011 and remember Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, the Democrat of Arizona, being shot in an assassination attempt. And certainly there have been other instances where cabinet secretaries or lawmakers have been targeted or yelled at, or in the case of the Homeland Security Secretary last week, felt the need to leave a restaurant because things were getting a little too hot. But this is something different, and we're entering a long, hot summer now ahead of what is expected to be a pretty angry and passionate midterm election season, and we should hope that everyone can kind of just tone it down a little bit and keep everybody safe.
Well, the discourse about civility appears to be consuming Washington this week. So how much are lawmakers concerned that all of that discussion will take away from those very pressing policy issues like immigration, for instance?
I think there are a lot of Democrats who are concerned about that, which is why they're so conflicted by what Waters was suggesting and why they're conflicted in how they respond to what happened to Press Secretary Sanders and others. There is a push left for this week here before the July 4th recess to see whether the House can pass something or at least debate it and hold a vote on the floor. Senators in both parties are set to meet today and tomorrow to talk about perhaps a more narrowly focused proposal that would essentially ensure the reunification of families that illegally cross the border, but there's some concern that even that might not get through. So we'll see. But with tensions as high as they were over the weekend, if that keeps up, it's going to be very difficult yet again for Congress to do anything.
All right. Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Ed, thank you.